What if a single piece of jewelry could shatter a billionaire's ironclad composure and rewrite history? We're not talking about a diamond from Tiffany's or a royal heirloom. We're talking about a simple silver necklace worn by a waitress in a rundown diner. This is the story of Eleanor Vance, a woman who commanded empires from her Manhattan skyscraper, a titan of industry whose heart was thought to be as cold as the glass and steel of her office. But one rainy Tuesday, a chance detour and a glimpse of a familiar crescent moon charm sent her billion-dollar world into a tailspin, causing her to break down in tears and unravel a secret that had been buried for 22 years. Stay with us to uncover how one waitress's necklace exposed a devastating lie at the heart of one of America's most powerful families. Eleanor Vance did not do unplanned. Her life was a meticulously curated symphony of power, precision, and control. At 78, she was the matriarch of the Vance dynasty and the formidable CEO of Vance Holdings, a global conglomerate with its gleaming headquarters, the Vance Tower, piercing the New York City skyline. Her days were scheduled to the minute by a team of assistants, her meals were nutritionally balanced by a private chef, and her emotions were tucked away behind a steely gaze in impeccably tailored Chanel suits. Grief was a private indulgence, a ghost she entertained only in the dead of night within the cavernous silence of her Upper East Side mansion. On this particular Tuesday, however, the symphony hit a discordant note. A sudden closure of the FDR Drive for a presidential motorcade had thrown her carefully planned route from a board meeting back to her estate into chaos. Her regular driver, a man who had been with her for 30 years, was home with the flu. The replacement, a nervous young man unaccustomed to Eleanor's glacial presence, made a wrong turn, plunging the Rolls-Royce Phantom into the unfamiliar, rain-slicked streets of Queens. "Where are we?" Eleanor's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the engine. "My apologies, Mrs. Vance. The detour. It's a bit convoluted. I'm rerouting now," the driver stammered, his eyes darting between the GPS and the road. Eleanor sighed, a sound of profound irritation. She glanced out the window, her gaze sweeping over worn brick buildings and modest storefronts. It was a world away from her own. Then a wave of nausea, sharp and unexpected, washed over her. It wasn't motion sickness, it was a dizzying, hollow feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "Pull over," she commanded, her voice suddenly strained. "Now." The driver, startled, immediately pulled the car to the curb in front of a small, unassuming restaurant named the Starlight Diner. Its neon sign flickered weakly against the gray afternoon. "Mrs. Vance? Are you all right? I need some air. And a glass of water," she stated, already pushing the door open before he could assist her. She ignored the driver's panicked offer to fetch it for her and strode toward the diner, the rain beating on her expensive wool coat. The moment she stepped inside, the chime of a small bell above the door announced her arrival. The diner was a time capsule of faded vinyl booths, a long formica countertop, and the comforting aroma of coffee and frying bacon. A few patrons hunched over their meals, barely noticing the out-of-place woman, who looked as if she had stepped out of a magazine cover. A young woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She had warm, kind eyes and a cascade of dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She couldn't have been older than 22 or 23. "Just one?" the waitress asked with a gentle smile. Eleanor, feeling a strange sense of unreality, simply nodded and slid into the nearest booth, the vinyl cold against her skin. The waitress followed, placing a glass of water and a menu on the table. "My name's Maya. Let me know when you're ready." As Maya turned to leave, something caught the light, a glint of silver at her throat. Eleanor's eyes, trained to spot the smallest detail on a balance sheet or arrivals tell, narrowed. It was a necklace, a delicate silver chain holding a crescent moon pendant, and nestled in its curve was a single, tiny star sapphire that shimmered like a captured piece of the night sky. Time stopped. The low chatter of the diner faded away. The smell of coffee vanished. All that existed for Eleanor Vance was that necklace. It was a ghost made tangible, a memory forged in silver. She saw it not around this stranger's neck, but around the neck of her daughter-in-law, Sarah, a gift from her son, Richard. He had designed it himself, a promise to his wife that he would always give her the moon and the stars. He had given it to her just a week before the accident that had taken him, that had taken Sarah, that had taken her infant granddaughter Amelia. A sound escaped Eleanor's lips, a choked, guttural sob that tore through the years of disciplined silence. Her carefully constructed dam of composure didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The teacup her hand had been reaching for rattled in its saucer. Her breath hitched, coming in ragged, painful gasps. Maya turned back, her friendly smile faltering into a look of alarm. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Eleanor couldn't answer. She could only stare at the necklace, her vision blurring with tears she hadn't shed in 2 decades. She saw her son's laughing face, heard his voice describing his design, felt the phantom weight of a baby in her arms. The loss, which she had managed for so long by encasing it in ice, was now a raging, searing inferno. Her shoulders began to shake. The great Eleanor Vance, the iron matriarch of New York finance, covered her face with her hands and broke down, weeping with an abandon that shocked the diner's few occupants into silence. Her driver, seeing the commotion through the window, rushed inside, his face pale with panic. "Mrs. Vance!" But she didn't hear him. She was lost in a storm of grief, a storm conjured by the impossible sight of a waitress wearing a ghost necklace. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, holding the coffee pot and staring at the weeping billionaire, utterly bewildered. She instinctively clutched the silver moon at her own throat, the only thing she had from a past she never knew, completely unaware that she was holding the key to the broken woman's heart. Arthur Pennyworth, Eleanor's butler, chief of staff, and the only person she truly trusted, arrived at the diner within 20 minutes. He found a scene of quiet chaos. Eleanor was now seated in the Rolls-Royce, her face pale and tear-streaked, staring blankly out the window. The young driver was being gently questioned by 2 police officers, and inside the diner, Maya was giving a statement, her voice trembling slightly. Arthur, with the quiet authority that came from decades of managing crises for the Vance family, handled the situation with swift efficiency. He placated the police, compensated the diner owner for the disruption, and with a single, sharp look, dismissed the terrified new driver. He then approached Maya. "Miss," he said, his voice calm and respectful, "I am Arthur Pennyworth, Mrs. Vance's personal assistant. She is unwell. She was quite taken by your necklace. May I ask where you acquired it?" Maya's hand flew to the pendant again, a protective gesture. "It's mine. It's all I have from before the foster system. The social worker said it was with me when I was found." Arthur's practiced composure flickered for a fraction of a second. "Found? I was a foundling, left at a fire station just outside the city when I was a baby. This was pinned to my blanket," she explained, her voice soft. Arthur's mind raced, connecting impossible dots. The timing, the necklace, it couldn't be. The official report was clear. The car crash on the Taconic State Parkway. Richard and Sarah killed instantly. The infant, Amelia, ejected from the car seat, her body tragically lost to the dense woods in the river below, never recovered despite extensive searches. But what if the report was wrong? He thanked Maya, his expression unreadable, and took her name and contact information. "Mrs. Vance may wish to speak with you again," he said, leaving the door open to possibility. The next day, a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up outside Maya's small apartment building in Astoria. A formally dressed courier delivered a heavy cream envelope embossed with a V. Inside was a simple typed letter. "Miss Thompson, I request the honor of your presence for a private meeting at my residence tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. A car will be sent for you. I wish to discuss the item of jewelry you were wearing. Sincerely, Eleanor Vance." Maya's hands shook as she read it. Her roommate, Chloe, a pragmatic nursing student, peered over her shoulder. "Whoa, that's the lady from the diner. This is insane. Are you going to go? She could be suing you. Or maybe she thinks you stole it." "I didn't steal it, Chloe," Maya said, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange, unexplainable hope. "It's mine." "I know, but people like that, they don't live in the same world we do. Be careful, May." The following day, Maya, dressed in her nicest blouse and a pair of dark jeans, was chauffeured to the Vance mansion. It wasn't a house. It was a limestone fortress, a relic of the Gilded Age occupying half a city block. Arthur greeted her at the door and led her through halls adorned with museum-quality art and silent, echoing marble floors. She found Eleanor in a vast library, seated in a wingback chair by a cold fireplace. The formidable power was back in her posture, but her eyes held a fragile, haunted look. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming," Eleanor said, her voice steady but lacking its usual metallic edge. "Please, sit." Maya sat on the edge of a plush sofa, feeling like a sparrow in an eagle's nest. "The necklace," Eleanor began, getting straight to the point. "You said it was with you when you were found." "Yes, ma'am. My son, Richard, designed that necklace. He was a gifted artist before he joined the family business. He made it for his wife, Sarah, shortly before their daughter was born. There is no other like it in the world. The design was never replicated. I have his original sketches in a vault." Maya listened, her breath caught in her throat. "They were in a car accident 22 years ago," Eleanor continued, her voice wavering for a moment. "Richard and Sarah died at the scene. Their daughter, Amelia, my granddaughter, was in the car. The official report said she was thrown from the vehicle, and her body was never found." Eleanor's eyes locked onto Maya's. "They told me she was gone. For 22 years, I believe she was gone." The implication hung in the air, immense and terrifying. Maya's mind reeled. Could it be possible? Was her entire life, her identity as an orphan, a lie? "Ma'am, Mrs. Vance, what are you suggesting?" Maya whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. "I am suggesting," Eleanor said, leaning forward, her voice raw with a desperate hope, "that a terrible mistake was made, or that I was told a terrible lie. I need to know the truth. I need to know if you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of 2 decades of grief, of questions without answers, and of a sudden, impossible hope filled the cavernous library. For Maya, the lifelong dream of knowing who she was and where she came from was suddenly crashing into a reality more unbelievable than any fantasy. She wasn't just an orphan anymore. She was a possibility, a question mark in the center of a billionaire's broken heart. And as she looked at the powerful, sad woman before her, she felt a flicker of connection, a strange sense of looking at something that was both a foreign country and, impossibly, home. The first step had been taken, but the journey to the truth would be far more treacherous than either of them could imagine. News of Eleanor Vance's episode at the diner and her subsequent summoning of a young waitress from Queens traveled through the rarefied air of the Vance family and its corporate empire with the speed of a whispered scandal. No one was more alarmed by this development than Julian Vance, Eleanor's great-nephew. At 35, Julian was the picture of modern aristocracy, handsome, impeccably dressed in Tom Ford suits, and possessing a charm that could disarm corporate raiders and society hostesses alike. He was the CEO of the Vance Media subsidiary and the heir apparent to the entire Vance Holdings fortune. For his entire life, he had played the part of the devoted, capable nephew, patiently waiting in the wings for his great-aunt to cede control. The sudden appearance of a long-lost heir was not just an inconvenience, it was a potential cataclysm that threatened to vaporize his entire future. He arranged a meeting with Eleanor under the pretense of discussing quarterly earnings, but his true agenda was reconnaissance. He found her in her office on the top floor of the Vance Tower, the city sprawling beneath them like a kingdom. "Aunt Eleanor, you look tired," he said, kissing her cheek with practiced affection. "I heard you had a bit of a turn the other day. I was so worried." "I am fine, Julian," Eleanor replied, her tone clipped. She was not in the mood for his saccharine pleasantries. "The reports are on your desk." "Of course," he said, his smile never wavering. "But I also heard a rather fanciful story. Something about a waitress and a piece of jewelry. The staff are gossiping. They're saying you believe you found Amelia." He said the name with a careful blend of sympathy and skepticism, planting the first seed of doubt. "Eleanor, we all know how much you've suffered. Grief can do strange things. It can make us see ghosts, Make us wish for miracles where there are none. This is not a ghost, Julian, Eleanor said, her eyes flashing with a fire he hadn't seen in years. I know Richard's work. I know that locket. I'm sure it's a convincing replica, Julian soothed. A clever little grifter sees a story in an old society magazine, finds a jeweler on Etsy to make a copy, and positions herself in a diner on a route your driver might take in a traffic jam. It's a long shot, but for a piece of the Vance fortune, people have done far more. His words were poisonously logical, designed to prey on Eleanor's natural suspicion and her fear of being made a fool. But her intuition, the same gut feeling that had guided her to build an empire, was screaming that this was different. We will be conducting a DNA test, she stated flatly, ending the conversation. Julian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. A DNA test was a problem. He needed to get to the girl first. Using the resources of his media company, he had Maya Thompson's entire life history on his desk within hours. Orphan, foster care, bounced between 3 different homes. Now a community college student working 2 jobs to pay her rent. She was a nobody, vulnerable, perfect. He found her during her break, sitting on a bench in a small park near the diner. He approached not in a suit and chauffeured car, but in jeans and a casual jacket, looking more like a concerned friend than a corporate predator. Maya Thompson? He asked, his voice warm and inviting. She looked up, startled. Yes. My name is Julian Vance. Eleanor is my great aunt. He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. I know this must be an absolute whirlwind for you, and I wanted to apologize on behalf of my family, and to warn you. Maya frowned, confused. Warn me? My aunt, she's a brilliant woman, but she has never truly recovered from the loss of her son and granddaughter. Julian said, his face a mask of sorrow. It's a wound that has never closed. Over the years, she has had moments, times when she believes she has seen Amelia, a girl at a debutante ball, an intern at the company. She projects her hope onto them. It's heartbreaking to watch. He let that sink in before continuing. She gets their hopes up, gets her own hopes up, and then reality comes crashing down, and it leaves everyone devastated, especially her. I'm telling you this because I can see you're a kind person, and I don't want you to be the next one hurt in this cycle of grief. She's not well, Maya. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Was it possible? Could this whole incredible, life-altering event just be the delusion of a grieving old woman? It almost made more sense than the alternative. She seemed so sure, Maya stammered. She's always sure, Julian said sadly. And I know what she's probably offered you. A DNA test. A chance to be a part of our world. But think about what happens when that test comes back negative. She will cast you aside, and you'll be left with nothing but a broken heart and a dream that's turned into a nightmare. You'll be just another one of her false Amelias. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Let me help you. I can make sure you're taken care of. A clean break. I can set you up with enough money to finish your education, buy a small apartment, live comfortably without ever having to worry again. No strings attached, just a non-disclosure agreement to protect my aunt's privacy. You can walk away from all this madness and have the life you deserve. The offer was staggering. It was a lifeline, a winning lottery ticket. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. But as she looked into Julian's earnest, sympathetic eyes, she saw a flicker of something else, something cold and calculating. He wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to buy her. He was trying to make her disappear. And in that moment, Maya realized she was no longer just a waitress with a mysterious past. She was a player in a game she didn't understand. And Julian Vance was not on her side. Her fear began to curdle into resolve. She didn't just want to know the truth for Eleanor's sake anymore. She needed to know it for her own. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice surprisingly firm as she stood up. But I think I'll take my chances with the DNA test. Julian watched her walk away, his charming facade melting away into a mask of cold fury. The girl had more backbone than he'd anticipated. The easy way had failed. Now he would have to ensure the DNA test failed too, whatever the cost. Eleanor, galvanized by a purpose she hadn't felt in years, refused to let Julian's insinuations deter her. She did, however, recognize the wisdom in proceeding with caution. She couldn't afford a public spectacle, nor could she allow her judgment to be clouded by pure emotion. She needed facts. She needed the best. She made a call to David Chen, a private investigator whose reputation was legendary in circles where discretion was as valuable as currency. Chen was a former NYPD detective, a quiet, meticulous man who specialized in unwrapping the cold, complicated secrets of the wealthy. They met in the same library where Eleanor had first spoken with Maya. Chen listened without interruption as Eleanor recounted the story, his face impassive. When she finished, he asked only one question. "Besides the necklace, Mrs. Vance, what does your gut tell you?" "My gut built a global empire, Mr. Chen," Eleanor replied, "and it is telling me that the girl in that diner is my blood." "Then my job is to prove it," Chen said. "I'll start with the original accident report. I'll need unredacted copies of everything. Police, fire, paramedic logs, witness statements, and the initial search and rescue reports." While Chen began his deep dive into the past, Eleanor arranged for the DNA test. She insisted on using the most reputable lab in the country, a facility in Boston known for its work on federal cases. To ensure absolute integrity, samples would be taken by a neutral third-party physician, sealed with tamper-proof evidence tape, and flown by private courier directly to the lab. Every step was to be documented. In the intervening days, Eleanor invited Maya to the mansion several more times. These meetings were awkward, tentative affairs, suspended between hope and disbelief. They didn't speak of the possibility directly, but it was the silent, breathing entity in the room with them. Eleanor found herself studying Maya, searching for echoes of her son. She saw it in the way Maya's eyes crinkled when she smiled, a mirror of Richard's easy grin. She noticed it in the determined set of her jaw when she talked about her struggles in community college, a reflection of Richard's own stubborn focus when he was working on a design. These were small things perhaps imagined, but they chipped away at the ice around Eleanor's heart. Maya, in turn, found herself looking past the billionaire and seeing a grandmother. She saw the profound sadness in Eleanor's eyes, the slight tremble in her hand as she poured tea, the way she would sometimes stare into the middle distance, lost in a memory. Maya felt a strange, primal pull, a longing to comfort this powerful, lonely woman. A part of her, the orphan part that had always yearned for family, was desperately willing it to be true. Julian, meanwhile, was moving his own pieces across the board. He knew he couldn't stop the DNA test, but he could corrupt it. He had a contact, a low-level lab technician at the Boston facility named Martin Wexler, a man with gambling debts and flexible morals. Through a series of encrypted messages and a cutout, Julian made his offer. A sum of money that would solve all of Wexler's problems in exchange for one simple task. Swap the sample labeled Thompson M with a prepared sample from an unrelated anonymous donor. Make the test come back negative. The day the samples were taken was excruciatingly tense. A stern-faced doctor came to Eleanor's home, taking swabs from both her and a nervous Maya. Arthur oversaw the process, watching as the samples were sealed, labeled, and placed into a locked courier box. Everything appeared to be by the book, but Julian was a step ahead. He had obtained the courier's flight details and schedule. His contact, Wexler, would be waiting. The plan was seamless. The result would be definitive. It would show no genetic match. After the doctor left, Maya was about to be driven home when Julian made an unexpected appearance at the mansion. "I just wanted to wish you luck, Maya," he said, his smile as polished as ever. "Whatever the result, I hope you find peace." He then turned to Eleanor. "Aunt, I've taken the liberty of setting aside a fund for Miss Thompson, a gesture of goodwill for the emotional distress this entire situation must be causing her. $5 million. She can have it today, no matter the outcome of the test. All she needs to do is sign a standard settlement and non-disclosure agreement." It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. The offer was so vast, so life-altering, it was designed to make Maya look like a gold digger if she refused. To Eleanor, it was presented as a compassionate act, a way to benevolently close the chapter. But to Maya, it was the final confirmation of his malevolence. This wasn't a safety net, it was a cage. He was so confident the test would fail, and this was his way of buying her silence and humiliation afterward. "No, thank you, Julian," Maya said, her voice shaking but clear. She looked directly at Eleanor. "I don't want your money. I just want the truth." Eleanor watched the exchange, a new kind of suspicion dawning in her eyes. Julian's magnanimity felt false, his timing too perfect. He was trying too hard to end this. Her gaze sharpened, and for the first time, she looked at her charming great-nephew and wondered what he was so afraid of. The ghost in the machine wasn't just the specter of a lost child. It was the chilling possibility of a betrayal closer to home. The week spent waiting for the DNA results was an exercise in exquisite torture for both Eleanor and Maya. They spoke on the phone once, a brief, stilted conversation where neither dared to voice the hope or fear that consumed them. For Eleanor, the mansion felt more like a prison than ever, its silent halls echoing with the ghosts of what if. For Maya, her tiny apartment felt like a waiting room for a new life, or a brutal return to the old one. She continued her shifts at the diner, the familiar routine a fragile anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Meanwhile, David Chen was meticulously sifting through 2 decades of dust-covered files. He found what he was looking for in a box of unscanned ancillary documents from the original state police report. It was a handwritten log from one of the first paramedics on the scene, a man named Frank Kowalski. His official type report was concise and professional, but his handwritten notes were different. They were messier, more emotional. One line, scrawled at the bottom of a page, caught Chen's eye. "Car seat empty. Blanket on ground nearby. No sign of infant. So much blood. God help us." But it was a small notation in the margin that made him pause. "Checked infant blanket. Small silver charm pinned inside fold. Crescent moon. Gave to Officer Brody, scene command." There was no mention of a necklace or a charm in the official evidence logs. It had vanished from the record. Officer Brody had retired 15 years ago and moved to Florida. The charm, however small, was a piece of physical evidence that had disappeared. It was another crack in the official story. Chen booked a flight. Back in New York, on the evening before the results were due, Eleanor asked Maya to come to the mansion one more time. She felt a desperate need to connect with the girl, regardless of what the science said tomorrow. They sat in the library again, a pot of chamomile tea between them. The silence was thick with unspoken words. Eleanor's eyes kept drifting to the necklace Maya wore. "Richard was so proud of that design," Eleanor said, her voice soft with memory. "He told me it was more than just a pendant. He loved puzzles, you see, locks and intricate mechanisms. He said he put a secret in it for Amelia, a message for her when she was old enough to understand." Maya's fingers went to the crescent moon. "A secret? I've had this my whole life. I've never noticed anything." "He was a master craftsman," Eleanor murmured. "He learned from an old Swiss watchmaker. He said the release was as fine as a spider silk." Driven by a sudden, shared curiosity, they moved to a large mahogany desk under a bright lamp. Eleanor produced a jeweler's loupe from a drawer. Maya carefully unclasped the necklace and laid it on the desk blotter. Up close, the craftsmanship was exquisite. The silver was smooth, the tiny sapphire perfectly set. Eleanor took the loupe, her hand trembling slightly as she examined the pendant. She traced its edges, feeling for the slightest imperfection, the faintest seam. Maya watched, holding her breath. "There," Eleanor whispered, her voice tight with excitement. She pointed to a spot where the outer curve of the moon met one of its tips. To the naked eye, it was seamless. But under the loupe, there was a hairline crack, no wider than a scratch. Using the tip of a fine pair of tweezers from a desk set, Eleanor pressed gently on the spot. Nothing happened. She tried again, applying pressure at a slight angle. A faint click, almost inaudible, echoed in the silent room. A tiny hinge, previously invisible, had opened. The front face of the moon swung away, revealing a hollow compartment no bigger than a fingernail. It wasn't a space for a photograph. It was too small. Tucked inside was a minuscule, tightly rolled slip of parchment, yellowed with age. With the tweezers, Eleanor carefully extracted it and unrolled it on the desk. Richard's handwriting, elegant and precise, filled the tiny space. It wasn't a long message, but what it said sent a shockwave through the room. "My dearest Amelia, If you are reading this, you are old enough to know a family secret. Your grandmother may have told you that Vance women are known for their strength, but some of us are also marked by the stars. Look behind your left ear. If you are truly my daughter, you will find the same small, star-shaped birthmark that my own grandmother carried. It is our hidden map connecting us through time. I love you more than all the moons and all the stars. Your father, Richard. Maya's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Eleanor stared at her heart pounding against her ribs like a drum. My mother had that, Eleanor breathed, her mind reeling. A small brown mark, shaped like a star. I had forgotten. Richard must have known the trait could skip a generation. Slowly, as if in a trance, Maya reached up and pulled back her dark hair, turning her head to expose the skin behind her left ear. And there, faint but unmistakable against her pale skin, was a small, perfectly formed, star-shaped birthmark. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, not of grief this time, but of pure, unadulterated joy. The science didn't matter anymore. The lab results were irrelevant. This was a truth written in ink by her son, a secret confirmed on the skin of her granddaughter. In the quiet of the library, 22 years of doubt and pain dissolved in an instant of absolute certainty. She reached out, her hand shaking, and gently touched Maya's cheek. Amelia, she whispered, the name a prayer on her lips. My Amelia. The next morning, the official email from the Boston lab arrived. Arthur opened it with a solemn expression and read the results aloud to Eleanor and Maya, who had stayed the night in a guest wing, too overwhelmed to go home. The mitochondrial DNA analysis indicates no genetic relationship between the two subjects, Eleanor Vance and Maya Thompson. The probability of maternity is 0%. A week ago, this news would have shattered Eleanor. Today, she simply nodded, a cold fury settling in her bones. Julian's overeager attempt to buy Maya off, the perfect timing of his goodwill offer, and now this scientifically impossible result. It all painted a picture not of a tragic mistake, but of a calculated, ongoing deception. He did this, Eleanor said, her voice dangerously quiet. Julian corrupted the test. As if on cue, David Chen called. His voice was grim. Mrs. Vance, I'm in Naples, Florida. I just spoke with retired Officer Brody. He remembers the charm. He said he logged it, but his supervising officer, a Captain Miller, told him to remove it from the report. Miller said it was irrelevant personal effects and would only cause the grieving family more pain. Miller retired, a very wealthy man, a few years later. I'm running a financial trace on him now, Chen continued. But that's not the main reason I'm calling. The paramedic, Frank Kowalski, his handwritten notes mentioned the charm, which means he found the blanket. I dug into his financials. For 5 years after the accident, he received an annual payment of $50,000 from a blind trust based in the Cayman Islands. That trust was dissolved in 2008. But I managed to trace its funding source. He paused. The trust was established and funded by your late brother-in-law, Lawrence Vance, Julian's father. The pieces slammed into place with sickening force. Lawrence, Eleanor's husband's younger brother, had always been consumed by a bitter jealousy. He felt his branch of the family had been sidelined in favor of Eleanor and her brilliant son, Richard. Lawrence wanted Richard out of the way, Eleanor pieced it together, her voice trembling with rage. He wanted his own son to inherit everything. He didn't just let Amelia disappear, he orchestrated it. Armed with the birthmark, the note from the locket, and Chen's damning financial evidence, Eleanor summoned Julian to the mansion. She insisted Amelia, be there. Julian arrived, radiating a confident sympathy. He had already been informed of the DNA results by his mole and was prepared to play the part of the comforting nephew, ready to help Eleanor pick up the pieces of her delusion. He entered the library to find Eleanor seated behind her desk, flanked by Arthur and a severe-looking David Chen. Amelia stood by the fireplace, her expression unreadable. Aunt Eleanor, Julian began, his voice oozing concern. I heard the news. I am so sorry. I know how much you wanted this to be true. Save your pity, Julian. Eleanor snapped, her voice like ice. We need to talk about your father, Lawrence, and a paramedic named Frank Kowalski. The color drained from Julian's face. His charming smile vanished, replaced by a twitching nerve in his jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about," he blustered. David Chen stepped forward, placing a folder on the desk. "We have bank records, Julian. Records of payments from your father's offshore trust to the paramedic who was first on the scene of your cousin's accident. A man who was paid to take a living, breathing infant from the wreckage, drive her 50 miles to another county, and leave her at a fire station where she would be swallowed by the system. That's preposterous. My father would never..." "And then there's Captain Miller, the police captain who made sure this locket, was erased from the evidence logs," Chen continued relentlessly. "He also enjoyed a very comfortable, early retirement courtesy of your father's generosity." Amelia stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Did you know, all this time, did you know who I was? This is insane," Julian shouted, his composure shattering. "My father is dead. You can't slander him like this. This girl is a fraud who got lucky with a birthmark." "My father's note wasn't luck," Amelia said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. She held up the tiny piece of parchment. "And a lab technician at the Boston facility named Martin Wexler isn't luck either. He's just a man with gambling debts who was very recently paid a large sum of money from an account connected to one of your shell corporations." It was a bluff. Chen hadn't gotten that far yet, but it landed like a physical blow. Julian staggered back, his face a mask of horror. He had been so careful, used so many cutouts. He never imagined they would dig so deep, so fast. He realized the game was over. "He told me," Julian finally whispered, his voice cracking. "My father. He told me on his deathbed. He confessed everything. He said he did it for me, for our side of the family. He made me swear to protect the secret, to protect his legacy." "His legacy?" Eleanor stood up, her entire body shaking with a righteous fury. "His legacy is a stolen child, a lifetime of grief. He didn't do it for you, you foolish boy. He did it out of spite and greed. And you continued the lie. You saw Amelia, you knew who she was, and you tried to buy her silence. You tried to poison me against my own granddaughter. You are not a Vance, you are a parasite." The truth finally revealed was uglier and more painful than any of them could have imagined. It was a story of a deep-seated family rot, of a jealousy so profound it had led to an act of unimaginable cruelty. Julian, exposed and broken, was escorted from the house by Arthur, his life of privilege and expectation evaporating before his eyes. In the aftermath, Eleanor and Amelia stood in the silent library, the weight of the confession hanging in the air. The long, agonizing search was over, but as they looked at each other, they realized that the truth was not an end, but a beginning. The hard part, learning how to be a family after 22 years of stolen time, had just begun. The public revelation of the Vance family's secret detonated like a bombshell across New York City and beyond. The story was a media-perfect storm, a lost heiress, a billionaire grandmother, and a tale of dynastic betrayal worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy. Tabloid headlines screamed, "The Vance heiress, from rags to riches." News vans camped outside Amelia's Astoria apartment building and the Vance mansion on the Upper East Side. Talk shows debated the psychological trauma of her upbringing, while glossy magazines offered fortunes for an exclusive interview. For Amelia, who still felt like Maya Thompson in every fiber of her being, the onslaught was a terrifying, disorienting nightmare. She was a ghost in her own life, her identity rewritten by strangers. Paparazzi would follow her on her walk to the local bodega, their camera flashes like machine gun fire. Old acquaintances from the foster system sold fabricated stories about her. She became a prisoner in her small apartment, with her only lifeline being her roommate, Chloe, who fiercely guarded the door and filtered the endless calls. The legal and corporate fallout, by contrast, was brutally efficient. Eleanor, moving with the strategic coldness that had built her empire, had Julian systematically excised from the family legacy. A team of lawyers presented him with an ultimatum in a sterile boardroom: accept his disinheritance and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, or face a litany of criminal charges backed by a mountain of evidence. Faced with public disgrace and the prospect of prison, Julian crumbled. His name was stripped from the Vance Media building, his shares were absorbed back into the family trust, and he vanished, reportedly taking refuge in a European city where his name meant nothing. He was a ghost of a different sort, erased by the very power he had schemed to possess. With the villain vanquished, Eleanor believed the fairy tale could begin. Her intentions were pure, born from 2 decades of repressed grief and guilt. She was determined to pour every resource at her disposal into erasing the hardships of Amelia's past. She moved Amelia into a lavishly decorated suite in the mansion, a space larger than her entire apartment. A personal stylist was hired, and a parade of bewildered couturiers from Chanel, Dior, and Valentino were summoned, tasked with replacing Amelia's wardrobe of jeans and thrift store sweaters. The breaking point came during a private appointment at Bergdorf Goodman. Eleanor had the entire floor closed to the public. Amelia stood on a pedestal, surrounded by mirrors and a sea of silk, cashmere, and tulle, while salespeople fawned over her. Eleanor watched with a proud, happy smile, believing she was finally giving her granddaughter the life she deserved. But Amelia felt like she was being dressed in a costume for a role she never auditioned for. The fabrics felt alien, the price tags obscene. She looked at her reflection, a stranger staring back, draped in impossible luxury, and felt a wave of claustrophobic panic. "I need some air," she mumbled, stepping down from the pedestal and fleeing through a service corridor, leaving Eleanor amidst a mountain of expensive clothes, her smile faltering in confusion. The tension escalated a week later. Eleanor insisted Amelia co-host a major philanthropic gala. "It's time for the world to meet you properly," she had said, as Amelia Vance. Dressed in a sapphire gown that matched the stone in her locket, Amelia was a vision. But inside she was suffocating. The ballroom was a glittering cage of chandeliers, champagne, and probing eyes. Society doyenne and business titans approached her with predatory smiles, their questions dripping with condescending curiosity. "How does it feel?" they'd ask. "Was it just awful?" She was an exhibit, the foundling heiress, a curiosity to be examined. Midway through the evening, the noise, the fake smiles, and the crushing weight of expectation became too much. She feigned a headache and had Arthur drive her back to the mansion, where she locked herself in her opulent room and cried for the simple, anonymous life she had lost. The final confrontation happened the following night in the cavernous library. Eleanor, frustrated and hurt by Amelia's withdrawal, finally demanded to know what was wrong. "I've given you everything," Eleanor said, her voice tight with emotion. "A home, security, a future beyond your wildest dreams. Why are you so miserable?" "Because you haven't given me everything. You've taken everything away," Amelia retorted, her voice trembling with a passion that surprised them both. "You've taken away Maya. You're trying to bury her under designer clothes and society parties. You don't want me, the person who grew up in foster care, who knows how to stretch $30 for a week's worth of groceries. You want a replacement for the granddaughter you lost, a doll you can dress up to fit into your world. But Maya is the one who survived for 22 years. She's the one who kept this necklace safe. You can't just delete her." The words struck Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. She looked at the fierce, beautiful, and deeply unhappy young woman before her and realized the profound arrogance of her actions. She had been treating Amelia's past like a stain to be removed, not the foundation of the person she had become. She had been so focused on righting the wrongs of the past that she was committing new ones in the present. Her icy composure finally melted away, replaced by a wave of profound remorse. "You're right," Eleanor whispered, sinking into a chair. "I have been a fool. In my haste to give you a future, I've tried to erase your past, your strength, your resilience. That all came from Maya. Forgive me, my dear. I've spent my life acquiring things. I thought I could, acquire a new life for you. I was wrong." She looked at Amelia, her eyes pleading. "Let's start over, not by erasing the past, but by building on it, together." A few days later, she came to Amelia with a proposition. "The Starlight Diner is being sold," she said quietly. "The owner is retiring. A developer wants to tear it down." "I know that place. It's a part of your story." A spark ignited in Amelia's eyes, the first genuine enthusiasm Eleanor had seen. "We can't let that happen." "No, we can't," Eleanor agreed. "But this won't be my project. It will be yours. Use the Vance resources, the lawyers, the capital. but make it your own, save it. It was the perfect synthesis of her two worlds. Amelia dove into the project with a ferocity and purpose that had been missing for months. She wasn't just an heiress anymore. She was a business owner. She negotiated the sale, hired architects who understood her vision of preservation and modernization, and oversaw every detail of the renovation. She kept the diner's soul. The classic booths were reupholstered, the vintage jukebox was restored, and the entire original staff was kept on with raises and benefits. But she also added her own touch, creating a community partnership to provide daily meals to a local women's shelter. Eleanor began to visit, not as a matriarch inspecting a property, but as a guest. She'd sit in the very same booth where her world had once fallen apart, and Amelia, often in an apron over her simple clothes, would sit with her on her break. In the comforting, bustling atmosphere of the diner, they finally began to build a real relationship. Amelia would tell stories of her favorite foster mother, a woman named Maria who taught her how to cook. Eleanor, in turn, opened up the vaults of her own memory, sharing tender, funny stories about Richard. One afternoon, she brought a dusty photo album to the diner. Together, they looked at pictures of a young boy with a mischievous grin, a teenager with a passion for building intricate models, a young man deeply in love with his wife. For the first time, Amelia felt she truly knew her father, and a painful, empty space in her heart began to fill. Their bond grew stronger, built not on grand gestures, but on shared moments. Amelia taught Eleanor the simple joy of a perfectly made milkshake. Eleanor, in turn, began to mentor Amelia, not in corporate rating, but in the nuances of philanthropy and responsible wealth management. Arthur Pennyworth, watching the transformation, would often smile quietly to himself. He saw Richard's kindness in Amelia and a new, softer light in Eleanor's eyes. One crisp autumn evening, a year after their fateful first meeting, Eleanor was at the diner for the one-year anniversary of its grand reopening. The place was packed, a vibrant mix of old regulars and new patrons. Amelia was moving through the room, greeting guests, her face glowing with a confidence and happiness that was radiant. She wasn't Maya Thompson anymore, nor was she solely Amelia Vance. She was a woman who had integrated her past and present into a whole powerful identity. She came and slid into the booth opposite Eleanor. She reached across the table and squeezed her grandmother's hand. "Thank you," Amelia said softly, "for seeing me, for finally seeing all of me." "It is I who should thank you," Eleanor replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You brought my heart back to life." The crescent moon necklace, which Amelia now wore only on special occasions, was nestled in a small velvet-lined box on the table between them. It was no longer a symbol of a mystery or a painful past, but a beautiful reminder of their extraordinary journey. The old, rigid symphony of Eleanor's life, once defined by loss and control, was gone. In its place was a new composition, one filled with the warm, lively notes of clattering dishes, happy chatter, and the easy, genuine laughter shared between a grandmother and the granddaughter she almost never knew. It was a symphony of a family, lost and found, finally playing in perfect, beautiful harmony. And so, a story that began with a shocking moment of tears in a humble diner ends not with a fairy tale wedding or a corporate takeover, but with something far more real and precious: healing. Eleanor and Amelia's journey reminds us that family isn't just about bloodlines or inheritance. It's about connection, forgiveness, and the courage to build a new future, even from the rubble of a painful past. It shows us that beneath the surface of power and wealth, the human heart has an incredible capacity for love and resilience, and that sometimes the most profound truths can be revealed in the most unexpected places, sparked by something as simple as a silver necklace. If this story of reunion, justice, and the enduring strength of family touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story that feels like real life, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales that remind us of the incredible, unpredictable, and ultimately hopeful twists of the human experience. Thank you for listening.